We all do, believe me.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Bardi Shop. I cannot stress enough how excited I am for this show. I have been waiting to do this show literally since I started this. I think it was a little over a year and a half ago. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm sitting across from Brian Beneduce. Brian, please say hello to any or all the cameras.
Hello, Steve.
So, I have put together a nice little intro. Before we get into that, I know you're a busy man. I know you're trapped in...
I'm here for you. Take your time.
I honestly couldn't wait to do this. I'm very excited. So, I've been told that when you're nervous to public speak, it's best to picture the people in the room naked. My only question is, how do I look?
You look phenomenal.
Thank you, baby. I
I've
appreciate
been doing
it.
that since you walked in the room.
So the reason I wanted to talk to Brian is because I met Brian when I was 15 years old, and you had such an immediate but massive impact on my life, because back in the day, we went to Powerhouse Gym. It was still in West Warwick, I think, at the time.
It was, yep.
And you, along with everybody else, were like these gargantuan figures. I was a skinny... I looked like a waterlogged lesbian when I was 15 years old.
Not true. I remember you in the gym. You did not look like
Lean. I was all forehead.
You were lean, which is fine.
So, I never realized exactly how much you and I had in common until, we became good friends over the last... I think it's been 27 years now that I've known you. And I just, after reading your book, and I know we've gone through this and we'll go into detail throughout this show, it astonishes me. We could literally almost be related with some of the things we've experienced in our life. But before we get into all that, there's something I put together that I want to read to you. So Brian, I believe that there are people who come into our lives, usually at a time when we most need someone to guide us, someone who you know will guide you in whatever path that you are on, but also someone who will never judge you for your faults, and for me that person has always been you. Whether or not you knew it, I've always looked at you as a mentor and somewhat of a guide. One of my deepest regrets, going back to my early childhood, teens, is that I never sought your counsel earlier in my life when my path had gone astray, when I doubted myself, and when I needed someone to help me see the better choices that I should have made. You were one of my biggest motivating factors as a young weightlifter. I used to watch you train at Powerhouse Gym, and I watched in awe as you moved small mountains. I could not believe you were kind enough to allow me to engage you in conversation, number one, but it didn't stop there. Your attitude was nurturing, kind, energetic, and inspirational, to say the least. I used to watch you train, and it fed my attitude with hope that I could one day achieve what you were capable of. Back in the day, you were my Arnold Schwarzenegger. In my younger days, but you were much more than that to me. You were hope that I could be something more than I was, and something I could never dream of. I saw so many similarities between us. Your charisma was very similar to mine in nature, but mine was very raw. I didn't know how to corral it, and I could not see what my value was at that time. Throughout our time knowing each other, you helped guide me through that forest of confusion that all young men and women venture through at some point or another. Your kindness and caring advice was more valuable to me at that time in my life than I could ever put into words. And for that, I want to thank you. So, I needed to say, that is something I've been waiting to say to you.
Steve, I have to tell you, humbly, and I only use that word once, because I sometimes get in trouble for using that word too much, but I don't know what to say to that. And I always say, sometimes you never know what impression you're making on somebody, because honestly, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It was me being me, it was you being you, and I thank you for those incredible words.
I don't feel like those...
I'm happy that I was able to...
I don't feel like those
you.
words do justice for you, because, back in the day, like the 90s was a different time.
Sure.
The world is a much different place now.
Mm-hmm.
So to have somebody like you, I mean, the camera's sort of picking this guy up. I need a wide lens at this point. But
Remember, pal, I'm 59, so
Yeah,
I'm a lot different than I was
you
when
look a
I
lot better
was
than most
39.
59-year-olds. But to have somebody with your, like I said, your charisma, your personality, and you were so eager and anxious to help, that had it not been for that, I can't guarantee that I would have stayed in that gym. It was intimidating back then. Think about some of the guys who used to train back then. Was it Paul Brown, that gigantic 6.5 foot guy?
Yeah.
Steve Brown, the guy with the scar on his face, East Finnish comp.
Yep.
Dave Chirico, Steve Rosati, rest in peace. There was some big characters, and I'm blessed to have met and gotten to know all of them. But I literally cherish the fact that you and I have had this bond throughout the past 27 years.
Well, I appreciate that, Steve, and I'll tell you where it came from. It came from me being a shy, timid little kid, and I remember looking up to, if you remember years ago, the little magazine with the guy getting the sand kicked in his face and all that stuff. In fact, I still have that little book. But and I always searched out people to look up to, and we didn't have gyms back then. We didn't have those kind of gyms back then. And I was 16 when I started training, and I used to look for people to inspire me, to motivate me. So I'm happy that I was able to do that for you, and it just comes from experience from me looking for help. And I have people along the way that help me also, not only in the gym but outside the gym.
So when I first met you, obviously you go through different stages in life. I never would have guessed that you were shy, like a shy guy. And then once I read the book, like, it was funny. I knew you as this one guy. You were Brian. You were this energetic, charismatic, sharp-witted. Everybody seemed to know you. Like, you kind of one of those guys when you walk in the room, it kind of becomes your room. Like, your energy was addictive. And I never knew this side of you till I read this book. And again, I said this to Brian before we started the show. This is now the third time I've read his book, and the third time I cry every single time, because it's very raw, it's very real, it's very enlightening, it's very sad. It's tough to see how, at the time when you were growing up, mental health wasn't a really widely addressed issue, not as much as it should have been. So a lot of folks right now, like a lot of people my age and younger, who our parents were in their 50s, going into their 60s, there is a lot of childhood trauma that has gone unchecked for decades. So, but you never, you're a hell of a poker player. You would never know, just from talking to you, looking at you, hanging out with you, working out with you, you would never know.
Well, I call it the chameleon effect. And when I was a kid, you always tried to get people to like you.
Oh, of course.
So you tried to change your skin color, you tried to change your personality to get to be whatever that person you're next to is, so they get to like you. So it started at an early age, and it's the mask. It's the mask you wear because as a kid, you want to be cool, you want to be tough.
Of course you do.
Like all kids, teenagers or what have you. And it was emotionally and physically draining at times. I used to go by myself. If you talk to people that know me now or knew me back then, they'll tell you a lot of times they called me a loner, but it wasn't because I was a loner. A lot of times I was afraid to be around people because I was shy.
It's
and I
tough
didn't
to
wanna,
act.
Yeah, it's very tough to act. I was nervous. I didn't know what I was because back then, again, we didn't know. I didn't know what it was. And it being that A word, that anxiety. And it starts at a young age.
Well, that and at a young age, if you bring up that word, there's keywords when you're a young man, you're a young adult growing up, that there's a stigma attached to them. There's a taboo about them that if you bring them up, now all of a sudden you're different, you're scarred.
Sure.
So you kind of put yourself in that position, but then knowing what we know about these issues now, wouldn't you say that you've probably made your life that much harder by spending all those years trying to hide it? And
I get asked that a lot. If I do a talk or a book signing or what have you, it's like, why didn't you tell anybody? And as a man, a boy, and I think most men will agree with this, and it's proven because when I do book signings at Barnes & Noble, where I do speeches or talks, 99% of the people that come up to me are women. And then they wait for the women to leave, and then the men will come gradually,
it's a pride thing.
Congregate. Sure.
Yeah.
And so as a man, as a boy, you don't want to show vulnerability. You don't want to show weakness. And it's what I'm trying to do is get rid of that stigma.
Yeah.
And I'm up there. I'm a bigger guy. I've built up a business. And the first thing I do is I get up there and I say, by the way, I'm petrified to speak in public.
Yeah.
Which 99.9% of the people of the population are also afraid to do. Seinfeld says they'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy.
Yep.
So that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to get people to realize it's okay. It's a mental illness. It's anxiety. It's panic, and get it out there and talk to people. Because once you tell people, and once you drop your armor, all of a sudden everything starts to fall into
Well, then you
place.
realize everybody is carrying some cross.
Absolutely.
Everybody is hiding something.
Yeah.
And I'm of the belief that when you see these celebrities on TV, as out of touch with reality as they are, I think they're more guilty of it than anyone else, between the plastic surgeries and the elaborate vacations and the celebrity sex tapes and all the bullshit that goes along with that. It's all masking some type of pain, whether it's a trauma or it's an insecurity, whatever it is. We're all going through it.
Look at Prince. Look at Michael Jackson. Look at Kevin Love recently. Look at all these people that are famous. And I love when people today, like even Kevin Love, I mentioned him because he's the latest one that I remember on Instagram. He came right out and said, I have a major panic attacks. The pitcher for the Red Sox, Brian Johnson.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they come out and they say, listen, I've got major problems with panic and anxiety. So now they have mental coaches for them. And it's prevalent, it's real. And I used to say, sometimes the scars, you don't see are worse than the ones you do.
Yeah.
Because, people don't want to show it. They don't want to show vulnerability.
No, but and I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because
Sure.
you spend your entire life putting up this front, and it's more exhausting to try to be somebody than you're not than to just be who you're naturally meant to be.
You talk about the gym, and it brings up a lot of memories. Because in the gym, excuse me, in the gym you have to use, as you know, your breath. And your breath is one of the most powerful things to move weight. And like you, I like to lift a lot of heavy weight. And I got into powerlifting. And when I used to powerlift, and at the time in the 80s, I owned a gym, and I was on a part of a little group, and we used to go through these little meets and powerlift. And they wore these bench shirts, and the bench shirts, sometimes it took 3 or 4 guys to put the bench shirts on. You look like little alligators and stuff like that. Well, mine was a triple extra large. I needed an extra large, so I could put it on by myself like a T-shirt, because I was petrified. I couldn't breathe. And once I got to my first power meet, in fact, my 5th place trophies over there that I'm most proud of, I had a squat, and I had to look out into the audience, and I was hyperventilating. Now try lifting 600 pounds or squatting 600 pounds hyperventilating. It just doesn't work. So that was my last power meet that I ever did, because if there's an audience there and I have to do something, I couldn't do it.